Can anything good come out of Nazareth? It's a seemingly insignificant question. I mean, it's one of those questions that you might just simply read right past as you're making your way through this passage. I have never preached on this particular passage before, and so I had a lot of fun studying it this week, and I just couldn't get away from that question. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? What's actually going on there? What is Nathanael speaking about? This calling of Nathanael is happening in the context of Jesus' ministry, at the beginning of his ministry, and he's calling his disciples, and Philip is amazed by who Jesus is, and he tells his friend Nathanael about this Jesus, and Nathanael responds by saying, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Anything? He's sort of stunned. He's shocked. He can't really believe that the Messiah, the one who was promised in the law and through the prophets, could come out of Nazareth. It's actually a significant question that, believe it or not, gets at the heart of who Jesus really is and what Christianity is all about. You might not think that when you just simply read right past it, but when you stop and you think about the question, as we will this morning, you start to think and realize there's really something more here, and the more is really getting at the heart of who Jesus is and what the Christian faith is all about. Now, Bible scholars differ on what Nathanael is referring to. Some say that Nathanael is referring to the cultural and geographical insignificance and irrelevance of Nazareth. I mean, Galilee was remote. It was away from the epicenter of Judaism in Jerusalem, and within Galilee itself, Nazareth barely registers. In fact, Nazareth doesn't even receive any mention from Jewish sources before the 3rd century at all. It's so insignificant, it's so irrelevant that it doesn't even get a mention before the 3rd century. And archaeologists debated for a while as to whether Nazareth even existed. And they made some discoveries that proved that Nazareth did exist. And it was a village of no more than 500 people in the days when Jesus grew up there. It's about 16 miles southwest of the Sea of Galilee, which means it's not near the Mediterranean Sea, and that means that it would not be near a lot of travel routes. There wasn't a lot of trading going on there. It wasn't a destination spot for people. There wasn't a whole lot of traffic coming in and out of Nazareth. And so it's evident why Nazareth would be looked down on. I mean, it's in the backwoods. It's in the sticks, you know? I mean, it's so irrelevant, it's so culturally insignificant, so small, that Bible scholars think Nathanael's saying, well, I mean, can anything good come out of Nazareth? I mean, can anything great come out of a place so small, so insignificant? I mean, in the eyes of more educated and urban Jews, the Nazarenes would have been judged as ignorant and irrelevant at best, uneducated, you know? These are not the culturally sophisticated people. These aren't the movers and shakers. Nazareth is not populated by people who make things happen, you know? I mean, no one of distinction lived there, and no one of importance came from there. And so to Nathanael, it seemed highly unlikely that the Messiah would come from a place like that. I mean, if you were looking for one that the prophets talked about, go to Jerusalem. You know, go to the place of sophistication. Go to the place of cultural significance and importance. That's where all the movers and shakers are. They're in a place like that. Well, other Bible scholars say that Nathanael asked his question because Nazareth had a reputation for sinfulness and immorality, which is why he uses the word good here. Can anything good come out of Nazareth at all? Implying that whatever came from Nazareth was not good in a moral sense. Bad people came from there. Immoral people came from there. Sinful people came from there. It almost seems sacrilegious, irreverent to say that the Messiah, the one who was promised by the prophets, the one who was revealed in the law, would come from a place like that, a place of immorality, a place of sinfulness, and all of that stuff. So if the first interpretation means, can anything good come out of a place so small? The second interpretation would mean, can anything good come out of a place so bad? Now, whichever interpretation is accurate, and it could be a little bit of both make a very strong point. Whichever one. Whether it's Nathanael going, can anything significant come out of a place so insignificant? Or if he's saying, can anything good come out of a place so bad? Can anything right come out of a place so wrong? Either one, both make a very strong point that Jesus shattered all preconceived notions of the kind of place that God's rescuer would come from. I mean, he shatters all preconceived notions about the kind of place that this promised rescuer would come from. I mean, it makes sense. And many Jewish people in that day who were hoping and praying for Messiah were hoping that he would ride in on a lightning bolt and overpower the Roman Empire and restore Israel to their place of political and cultural prominence. And up until this point, he's been very disappointing, this Jesus. He shows up in a stable, not a palace. God goes first to shepherds, not to the political powers. As Jesus makes his way through his 3 years of ministry, I mean, he hangs out in the outskirts. He associates with bad people. And even now, as he's calling his disciples, he's calling fishermen and people who aren't very significant. He's not calling the power brokers. He's not calling the movers and shakers. And now this just puts Nathanael over the edge. I mean, he comes from where? I mean, seriously, it would make sense that, he would come from a prominent place, that he would come from a significant place, a place that would cause people to take notice. I want to look at this question that Nathanael asks and unpack it a little bit, and then I want to look at Philip's answer. Philip's answer is a remarkable answer. When Nathanael asks his question, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip says, come and see. There's a lot packed into that question, and there's a lot packed into that answer. So I want to look at the question first and then the answer. Nathanael's question, believe it or not, is a question that we all ask in one way, shape, or form. You may not think that the sentiment behind Nathanael's question is a sentiment behind our questions, but we all ask this question, and it's this: can light really come out of darkness? I mean, can redemption really come out of wreckage? Is that possible? The question for us more practically is this: can anything good come out of failure? Can anything good come out of teenage rebellion? Can anything good come out of adultery? Can anything good come out of bankruptcy? Can anything good come out of losing my job? Can anything good come out of someone who loved me turning their back on me? Can anything good come out of loneliness and discouragement and loss? Can anything good come out of death and disease? Can anything good come out of an emotionally dead marriage or singleness or shattered dreams? Can anything good come out of that stuff? I mean, I'm assuming that we've all asked that question. We've all wrestled with that. We are fallen, broken people living with other fallen, broken people in a fallen, broken world, and that means life is hard and pain is real. We're not acting super spiritual by pretending that every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before. I mean, these are some real deep existential questions that all of us have asked at various times. It's easy to get discouraged as a pastor because you see so much wreckage. I mean, pastors and church leaders are on the front lines of the wreckage of people's lives. I mean, people will come and tell me what they won't tell you, believe it or not. I remember my friend Steve Brown saying that someone in his church said, "You know what, Pastor, someday I'm going to take you out and show you the real world." And he said he looked at this guy and said, "The real world? I see more of the real world in a week than you've seen in a lifetime." So I've cleaned up after more suicides and buried more babies and heard more confessions than I would ever want to in 10,000 lifetimes. And so at times it's hard because you see so much wreckage. You're on the front lines of the mess of people's lives, and you hear people's problems and sometimes wonder, will this person ever hope again? I'm never surprised when people come to see me and describe the wreckage of their lives, when they come and tell me their secrets, when they come and they confess their sins. I'm never surprised. I feel like I've up until this point, I've heard just about everything I could hear. So I'm never really surprised. I don't have a very, very, very high view of human nature, okay? Because we're sinful and because we're fallen. And to be honest, sometimes I hear stories and I think to myself, this is a mess that'll never be cleaned up. I don't say that, but I hear some of these stories and go, there is no light coming out of this darkness. There is no redemption coming out of this wreckage. So it's not only as I think about my own life, but it's as I think about the lives of other people, and I think about what goes on in our world and what goes on in our lives. And oftentimes I ask this question, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Anything at all? I more than just other people's lives and stories, I wrestle with my own story. Things have happened and will happen in my life that cause me to go, will this ever be put right? Ever? For a variety of different reasons, this has been just a really tough year for Kim, my wife, and for me. Things have happened in our life and the life of our church and the lives of those we love that have been, at times, incredibly discouraging. Just been a tough year. Now, on the one hand, we grieve. No one enjoys tough years or tough days or difficult months. On the other hand, we've lived long enough to know that God does some of his best stuff during some of the worst times. And so we hope, but it's at times it's been very discouraging, and we've been living, it seems, in an exhausting fog, and it's been hard to see light at times. It's sapped our energy at times. It's suffocated our excitement at times, and I've found myself wondering over and over and over again, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Anything, when you know how that feels, when you're going through a difficult season for whatever reason, Sometimes you know why you're going through a difficult season, other times you don't. Job had no idea why he was going through a difficult season. I just keep going back to that remarkable story where Job loses absolutely everything, and he and his friends for a very long time try to figure out why Job is suffering the way that he's suffering, and we as the reader know why he's suffering the way that he's suffering. And interestingly, when you go back and you read Job chapter 1, specifically verses 1 to 5, you realize he's not suffering because he was bad. He's suffering because he was good. Oftentimes we make the mistake of thinking that, oh gosh, we're going through a difficult season because God's doling out misery in direct proportion to the mistakes that we have made. And we see Job's story turn that upside down. But what's fascinating to me is God never, ever, ever explains to Job why he went through what he went through, ever. Sometimes we know why we're going through difficult seasons. Other times we don't know why we're going through difficult seasons. One of the great comforting passages in the Bible for me is Psalm 107. Because in that psalm, you have two different types of people crying out to God. You have people who are in trouble because they messed up and got themselves in a jam. And then you have people who are crying out to God for help because they are in the receiving end of a mistake that someone else made. Okay, they may have been doing something right and they're being punished by someone else. And either on the common refrain for both of those people, either the person who did something wrong or stupid or foolish and now they're suffering the consequences for it, or someone who didn't do anything wrong or stupid or foolish but is still suffering the consequences of someone else's mistakes. Whatever it is, the common refrain for both of those people is, and they cried out to the Lord for help and he heard their cry. And that is remarkably relieving to me, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're in a jam, if you're in a difficult spot, if you're in a season of despair and depression, and you find yourself asking the question, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Is there ever going to be a light at the end of this tunnel? Are things ever going to turn around? Are things ever going to get right? Is he ever going to love me the way that my heart longs for him to love me? Am I going to remain single the rest of my life? I mean, will my kids ever listen to me? Will I ever make enough money so that I don't have to worry about paying the bills? Will my health ever hold up? I mean, when we find ourselves asking those questions, we can sometimes get so bogged down with wondering, are we suffering because of something we did, or are we suffering because of something someone else did? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What matters is, who do you cry out to in times of need? That's the remarkable thing about Psalm 107. I mean, it's inspired to show us that at the end of the day, what matters is not whether you did something to get yourself in this jam or whether you're in this jam because of the fault of someone else. The question is, when you're in the jam, where do you look to for help? Do you try to pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Do you try to make it on your own and do it yourself? Or do you cry out to the Lord for help? Do you cry out for mercy and assistance? And so, it's at times for Kim and for me, it has felt like, okay, what do we need to do? And, or is this something that's someone else's fault, or is it our fault, or whatever else we might conclude? And the sweet, comforting reminder that we find in the Bible is just cry out to the Lord for help. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. We sang it this morning. Do you ever feel like that? Do you feel like that now? Do you ever look at your life and wonder, can anything good come out of Nazareth? I think I've told you this story before, the story about the guy who was feeling sick, and this was going on for a number of months, and he finally decided to go to the doctor, and the doctor ran a number of tests and said, I'll get back to you in a week. And so the man waited patiently by his phone for a week, and at the end of the week, the doctor calls, and the man answers the phone, and the doctor says, John, this is Dr. So-and-so. And he said, I have bad news for you, and I have very bad news for you. Okay? And the guy's like, well, that's terrible, Bad news and very bad news, that's horrible. And he said, I'll tell you what, go easy on me. Give me the bad news first. And the doctor said, the bad news is you have 24 hours to live. And the guy says, that's the bad news? What's the really bad news? He goes, the really bad news is I was supposed to call you yesterday. Now, I was thinking about that yesterday, and I'm going, sometimes life feels like that. Does life ever feel like the only thing coming down the pike is bad news and very bad news? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? You look at your life, you've struggled for a long time with the same thing, I've talked to couples who've been married for 40 years, and some of the things that plague their marriages today are the same things that plagued their marriages 35 years ago. Just a lifetime of relational tension that just never seems to go away. A relational thorn in the flesh, so to speak. And perhaps you've cried out to God and said, can you please remove this thorn in the flesh? Can you please relieve me of this burden and relieve me of this pain? Can you make my life easier? Can you just make our children respond? I talk to parents all the time who raise their kids in church and put them in Christian schools and put them in a Christian environment and taught them how to pray and taught them how to read the Bible and all of that. And their kids have just bolted from all things God. And now those kids are 25, 30, some of whom are in big trouble. And they find themselves as parents going, what happened to train up your child in the way that he should go, and one day he'll return? Seriously, God, where are you? Why won't you come and help? How long, O Lord, the psalmist cries, how long? How long will you ignore me? How long will you not hear my cry? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Well, Philip's answer is remarkable in many ways. When Nathanael says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip says to him, come and see. Well, Nathanael goes with Philip, and he sees Jesus, and Jesus proceeds to blow his mind. Blow his mind. He gets out of his doubt by seeing Jesus. And he sees Jesus, and Jesus blows his mind. And as mind blown as Nathanael is, Jesus says, you haven't seen nothing yet. I mean, you believe in me? You confess that I'm the Son of God just because I said I saw you sitting under a fig tree? Just wait. I'm going to open up the heavens. You're going to see things you've never seen before. And he goes on to just blow his mind. Nathanael, in seeing Jesus, is given faith to believe that Jesus is who he says he is. And notice Nathanael's words after he sees Jesus. Verse 49, Nathanael answered him, just because Jesus said, I saw you by the fig tree, he says to him, that's all Jesus had to say. All he planted was a mustard seed of faith. That's it. I saw you by a fig tree. Jesus gifts Nathanael a mustard seed of faith, and Nathanael says in verse 49, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel. That's all it takes, something small. Jesus gifts faith, opens eyes, and shows us who he is, and then says, you haven't seen anything yet. I mean, I've saved you. I've opened your eyes. I've raised you from death to life. And now the fun begins. Now I'm going to show you myself in all of my splendor, in all of my glory. And by giving you the gift of faith, you will be able to trust me even when you can't trace me. As you make your way through the fallenness of this world, you will see things that will give you hope, that will establish your heart and give you confidence to press on and strain forward. Now, what's fascinating to me about this is when you're on the brink of despair and you're experiencing what the Puritans called a dark night of the soul, and you're looking for help, okay, and we all experience this. Turning to yourself will bring you no hope. It'll bring you no rescue. It'll bring you no relief, and yet that is our default mode. Our default mode is to turn inward. When things start going south, the temptation is, something's broken, I gotta fix it. I gotta fix it. I just have to fix it. And we try to fix people, and we try to fix circumstances. We try to manipulate things so that we can get things back under control and fix the thing that seems to be broken. We turn into ourselves, and you know as well as I do that every internal answer collapses underneath us. Every one. You have a struggling marriage and you take it upon yourself to fix the other person. I mean, how does that work? You have children who just aren't listening. Okay, they're going down a different road than you had hoped and prayed they would go down, and you do your best to try and fix them. How does that work? The more you try to fix, and we all experience this, the more you try to fix things by mustering up your own internal power, the worse things get. Oftentimes. Too often our counsel to ourselves and to other people is the equivalent of giving a drowning man swimming lessons. Paddle harder, kick faster. That's what America tells us to do. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Be all that you can be. You can make it happen. Just do it. Just grit your teeth and do it. You can fix things. We assume that we possess the internal power to get things right, so we turn into ourselves. But listen, this is the fascinating point of this passage. Turning to the external object of your faith, Jesus was outside of Nathanael. Okay, Nathanael in and of himself was full of doubt. Really? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? As far as I know, everything there that happens and the people who come from there are bad, immoral, insignificant. They're not the cultural elite, they're not the important people. They're not the ones high on the totem pole. It's amazing to me, sidebar, it's amazing to me how much energy and effort we spend trying to get to the top. It's amazing to me, okay? It's amazing to me how much time and energy I spend, how much time and energy we spend trying to get to the top. We've bought into the American dream, which is a lie. Get to the top and you'll find freedom, even though the Bible says just the opposite. I mean, first of all, the life and ministry of Jesus demonstrates that he chooses the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, the weak things of the world to shame the strong. I mean, Paul in Corinthians, as I alluded to a few minutes ago, says over and over again, take this thorn out of my flesh, make me strong, you know, establish me so that I can stand on my own 2 feet. And God says no, because you're missing the point. It's in your weakness that I flex my muscles. It's in your weakness that I showcase my strength. It's amazing to me how much we fight to climb. And regardless of how exhausting it can be to climb the ladder of life, whatever that ladder might be for you, we still try, believing that the next step will bring about the freedom that I long for. And then you get to the next step and you're like, man, I'm more tired and less free. Well, all that can mean is I just got to climb the next step. And we do it over and over and over again. And the fact of the matter is, grace runs downhill. God meets us at the bottom. He's not standing at the top saying, climb. He's at the bottom whispering, it is finished. God came down because we could never, ever go up. And so, we turn away from ourselves, as Nathanael does here, and we turn to the external object of our faith. Okay, turning to the internal quality of your faith will always let you down because it's really not that strong, you know? I remember Tim Keller giving this great illustration of the children of Israel passing through the Red Sea. And he says, you can imagine these, couple million people passing through the Red Sea. God accomplishes this great miracle through Moses, splits the Red Sea, and the Israelites, the children of Israel, are walking on dry ground with these huge walls of water on either side. And he said, I'm sure some of them were saying, God is amazing, this is awesome. We're in good shape, we're safe. And I'm sure others were going, oh my gosh, any second now this is going to crash. It's going to crash. It's going to crash. We're going to die. My kids are going to die. My spouse is going to die. We're all going to die, we're all going to die. They would say to Moses, did you bring us out here to die? It was better when we were slaves in Egypt. At least we got 3 square meals a day. So you can imagine some of them are walking through, going through dry ground, and they're either side, these huge mountainous walls of water, and some of them were going, God is good, God is amazing, and they're just dancing, and they have total confidence that God is going to see them through. But then there are others, I'm sure, who are biting their fingernails the whole time, doubting the entire time. And Tim Keller says, what's amazing is they all make it out, they all make it to the other side. And he said, it was not the internal quality of their faith that saved them. It was the external object of their faith that saved them. Big difference. Turning inward to try to discover the hero within will always let you down. Nathanael believes because he turns away from his doubt and turns to the external object. He sees Jesus. And when you turn to the external object of your faith, namely Jesus and his finished work on your behalf, it's the only place that we find peace and reorientation and help. The gospel always directs you to someone outside of you instead of to something inside of you for the assurance that you crave in seasons of desperation and doubt. When you find yourself asking the question, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Will there be any light that comes out of this darkness? Is it possible for redemption to emerge from this wreckage? Is it possible? Turning to the internal quality of our faith, or turning into ourselves, or trying to make it happen on our own, trying to fix everything and everybody, will only cause deeper despair and desperation. Our hope and our security is not in the trustworthiness of ourselves or others, but in the trustworthiness of Jesus. It's not our strength. It's Jesus' strength. So the surety that you long for when everything seems to be falling apart won't come, as I mentioned, from discovering the dedicated hero within, but only from the realization that no matter what you're going through or how you're feeling, you've already been discovered by the hero without, on the outside. The one who promises never to leave you or forsake you. The one who alone promises to make all things new. The one who alone promises to wipe away all of our tears. The one who alone promises to help you, strengthen you, hold you up, protect you, and guide you. The one who alone promises to meet every need according to his riches and glory. There's only one who can make good on that promise. Your spouse can't do it. You can't do it for yourself. Your friends won't do it. Your pastor won't do it. Your elders won't do it. Your children won't do it. I mean, there's only one who can make a promise and come through infallibly. Everyone else in this world will let you down. Everyone else. I mean, you tell me, if you're married, okay, the day you got married, you and your spouse made some amazing promises to one another. And if I were to interview you and your spouse privately, do you think the testimony they would give of you would be they have kept those promises infallibly? Infallibly. No, I mean, even the people closest to us let us down. Okay, I mean, we make promises, and we ought to make promises. Okay, it's not that the promises we made the day we got married were bad promises, but the realization that God and God alone can keep his promises infallibly, because I'm a sinner. I'll do my best and I'll try, but I will let you down. Don't look to me, and I won't look to you to be what only Jesus has promised to be. Only he can save you. I can't. Only he can save me. You can't. And so the one who promises, the one who alone promises to be for us what we could never be for ourselves. You know, if you read the Bible, and a lot of people do, and conclude that Christianity is for the good people and the strong people, you're reading the Bible wrongly. Okay, you just are. A lot of people read it that way. They read it as if it's a book to help guide the strong and the good. And yet, when you read the Bible from cover to cover, you realize that Christianity is for bad and weak people. Because bad and weak people are the only kinds of people that there are. I mean, sometimes I hear Christian people speak as if they live outside of the human race. You know? I mean, I'm like, no, wait a second. I mean, you know, the one thing that separates us from people who don't believe is Christ's rescue. Okay, it's not anything we've done. It's not any good that we bring to the table. It's Jesus. It's his power, it's his rescuing might that separates us from those who don't believe. You see, the world wants to avoid Nazareth at all costs. I mean, it tells, and if you don't believe me, just watch Dr. Phil, okay? I mean, it tells the brokenhearted to move on. It tells the poor, just work harder. It tells the sorrowful, just brighten up. It tells those who are in a slump, just snap out of it, okay? I mean, just get over it. Snap out of it. I mean, the world says that nothing good can come from the place of weakness and brokenness, so get yourself out of a jam. I mean, these are the places that we must escape. These are the places that we spend our lives trying to avoid. We run from weakness. We run from brokenness like it's the plague. Nothing good can come out of Nazareth, so avoid it at all costs. But the good news is that God knows that you are a citizen of Nazareth. He knows that you're hungry, that you're unknown, that you feel anonymous. He knows that you're dying, and he knows that you're beaten. He knows that you're sorrowful. He knows that you're poor. He knows your secrets. He forbears with your pretending. He knows that you possess nothing. He knows that you can't rescue yourself. He knows about you what no one else knows about you. He knows about you those things that you hope no one finds out about you. Okay? I've done this before. In fact, this is a really funny story. On Easter Sunday, I left here, and I was driving home. Zach's laughing. You'll start laughing in a minute, I hope. I was driving home, and I was trying to call Zach Hicks, our esteemed worship pastor, because he and his family were coming over to our house for lunch. And for whatever reason, it wasn't connecting, and so I just kept calling over and over again. And I pull up to a light no more than 4 blocks from here, and I'm waiting. I'm the first guy in line. The light's red, and there's a car driving in the middle. Okay, I'm on the far right. There's 3 lanes. Car driving in the middle, car driving in the far left, and the car driving on the far left, I see in my rearview mirror, basically runs the car in the middle almost off the road. So I'm thinking, wow, an accident almost just happened. And the 2 cars pull up, and there's some young guy driving a Lexus or a Range Rover or something, Lexus truck or Range Rover, in the far left lane. His wife is sitting in the passenger seat. He's driving. And I hear this screaming, and I look over, and this guy is screaming at the guy who was in the middle. And the guy who was in the car in the middle is this old man, and he was holding on to his steering wheel and shaking, like this guy's gonna kill me, okay? I don't know if he accidentally veered a little bit into his lane, and this guy, who clearly has a road rage problem, couldn't take it. And so, this guy is screaming, literally, at this old guy. And I watched this for about 5 seconds, and I can't take it anymore. Easter Sunday, okay? So I roll my window down. I was like, hey, okay? And the guy, Jesus hated bullies, so I do too. And so the guy, the guy sort of looks at me, and I was like, hey, why don't you pick on someone your own age, okay? You should have a pastor like this, all right? You should, all right? You should, okay? Who doesn't, when you get old, and some road rage maniac is picking on you, I will come to your aid, all right? So his wife starts to talk. His wife starts to speak. And his wife's like, hey, why don't you, she was gonna say, I'm assuming, mind your own business. The guy who's driving puts his hand over his wife. He's like, shut up, okay? And then he starts yelling. I was like, well, that's a real nice way to talk to your wife, Anyway, so I basically, the guy sort of, calmed down and drove away, and the old guy kind of looked at me and he was like, thank you, So, I drove back. Well, I get a phone call the next morning from Zach Hicks. Apparently, the phone was on when this encounter happened. He goes, I have 30 seconds of you confronting some guy and saying something in a muffled way. I think you said, hey, why don't you pick on someone your own age? So I told him the story and, all that kind of stuff. I say all of that to say, have you ever sent a text or left a message you didn't know anyone was listening? You maybe had a conversation and the guy you were talking about comes around the corner. Something like that happens. You're like, oh my gosh, someone heard what I just said. Or I sent the text to the wrong person. Or something like that. Has that ever happened to you? Okay, that's happened to me. And we're so like, oh my gosh, something about you has been revealed that you didn't want anyone to know about. God knows all that stuff. He hears every conversation. He knows what's in your heart and your mind. He knows not just what you say, but he hears all of your words. He knows the disposition of your heart at all times, that even when you're doing something good, if your motivation's wrong on the inside, he knows that. He knows the dirt on you. Knows the dirt on me. He knows everything about us. And he knows you can't rescue yourself. I know all your secrets. You're worse than you think you are. He knows that you hurt those that you love. He knows that you're afraid of everyday life. He knows that you're overwhelmed. He knows that you're exhausted. He knows. You know why? Because he comes from there. He's from Nazareth. I mean, our sin and our pain is God's hometown. That's where Jesus came from. I mean, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Is there any hope? We say, come and see Jesus. He's from the same place you are. Hebrews 4:16 spells this out clearly. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. God took on human flesh and frailty. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. He's been there. I mean, all of your mess is where God comes from. And in the person of Jesus, died for it. I mean, he took on his own shoulders the sins of the world. All of the disappointments, all of the frustrations, all of the road rage, okay? All of the bad things that you've done, all the things that you've said that you wish you could take back, your lust, your greed, your pride, all of that stuff. He took that stuff on himself. He became sin for us so that we might become the righteousness of God. What Athanasius, the early church father, called the glorious exchange.